I'm like, you are the most lazy man in this whole house.
Right. Especially if you're
So when I cut to this, I can play a movie or
different energies given from this client just by tilting ahead. So whether you want someone to
it's like writing that stuff off like it's nothing. It might be $29.99.
And I'm going to be shooting the pitcher or the batter, but there's always a chance.
Making us look good. 45 degrees, right on the side up. So I'm probably going to do that. I don't want it to. Still, it's going to come out here.
Back in 2018 to the Sony system. So I shoot with the Alpha 1. I found the A7. Okay, so now we're starting to shoot. I'm going to give everybody a chance to shoot. My white balance. Cool.
So you said 5,900.
I'm at 57 on the grade, a little bit more inches to show you guys the differences. Yeah, so kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, it's kind of what do you want to get out of it? What's the goal of it? And whatever your process is. Yeah. Cool, guys. I'm gonna just one at a time would be awesome. Yeah, 100%. So actually, it's a good point. The F lens that Sony released years ago. For me, if you have more with a 135, you'll notice that the face looks a little bit different than. Yeah. That's why I think 100 is a really nice kind of compromise. It gives you a little bit of.
That you can say whatever the heck you want and then apply works.
Don't fuck with it, right?
You want to talk about my favorite lens right now?
I know what this favorite
The
lens
50 to 150 people. So imagine that's 150. But I like shooting on zooms because
that means like you can get a system going. And now obviously large format is getting more popular and a lot of great stuff's coming out for it. But lenses that aren't included in that like 90 lens collage they showed me where it's like any other gaps. Yeah. I bet. So this is again shrouded compliment. Okay, somebody like me, I compare a lot of different cameras. Sony is the most power efficient camera. Doesn't mean that other cameras can't have. They put in big chunker batteries, they get the job done. But if you compare battery to battery equal, or operation runtime, you cannot beat a Sony camera for power efficiency. So this tells us a couple things if you're a computer nerd, which is that one, possibly die size operation, nanometers, these kinds of things must be smaller on Sony cameras, and or that the software and the sort of like end-to-end configuration has to be developed and designed in a way that maximizes to achieve that power efficiency, which goes to the reliability aspect, by the way. If you stick any one of these Sony cameras press record, you're getting like 2.5 hours without a sweat, right? On battery, which is great. And they've been using that same F700 battery for a couple of years, and it hasn't, like, more than a couple of years, and it hasn't done the thing where you're like, the new cameras are coming out, and the battery's not doing its job anymore, because again, they're in there, and they're like tightening everything up. So now imagine somebody comes along like me and goes, by the way, this doesn't, you missed, when you did all that super configuration stuff, you forgot to make 30p do a high efficiency codec. And they're like, oh, no problem. We'll tell that engineers. And you tell the engineers, then just realize that's on line 4 of the 10,000 lines of code that are now perfectly optimized. And they're like, okay, let's switch to line 4, and then everything cascades into oblivion and the batteries don't work anymore. So like, I think we'll just leave that out. I feel like that's my guess, if you ask me. It's so optimized that you can't just turn on a switch, and it's like the amount of work that would go into like fixing that is more than they want to do. Or it's some licensing thing that nobody wants to tell anybody about, where it's like you got to pay big bucks to, what's a funny brand? I didn't want to say a real brand, but it's like you got to pay big bucks to, you know, who would own a patent? Yeah, New Balance. But if you imagine what I'm saying, then you fill in the blanks of like maybe somebody owns that, kind of like ProRes. You don't just go throwing ProRes on a camera without signing the right pieces of paper, right? Maybe high efficiency 30p, it's capable. We know it's capable. It can do.
Hoping in the future.
If it can do 60, it can do 30, right? Like it doesn't make any sense.
K60 no problem.
Doesn't make any sense.
Thank you.
I think I used to be chasing what I thought was a cinema camera, and it put me down the path of like so many different brands and buying a whole bunch of different cameras, seeking this like ethereal cinema image that we don't even really know what it is, right? That's what I'm getting to. I was chasing something that was ultimately my downfall, right? Where it was like the image quality that I wanted just had to come from me, and I've gotten to a point now where I feel confident whether I have my iPhone or I'm shooting on a Venice 2 or I'm shooting on a Breno or an FX3 or an FX30, that I can get the image that I want, because we're at a point in technology now where every sensor is just so good that now I get to pick creature comforts, right? So I'm picking things that make me comfortable while I'm shooting, the way it feels in my hand, where the knobs are, where the switches are, what features does it have in terms of frame rates, does it have Super 35, does it not? And I'm not chasing this image quality, because now I can make anything I want, look however I want, either in camera or on post, because I've just worked so hard with my taste and my talent and practice, that image quality, like I interviewed Oren Sofer, who did the creator on the FX3, the cinematographer, for that big movie, the John David Washington one, the sci-fi movie, right? And his first thing he said to me was like, once we tested the FX3 and we put it in and we threw our LUT on it and it looked like the image that we needed, we never thought about that camera again. And what did the whole world do? At least probably everybody in this building thought the FX3 could make movies, but we could have made movies before the FX3, okay? Like the FX3 wasn't what made that movie, it was the director, Gareth Edwards, it was the cinematographer, it was Greg Fraser, who also shot the Batman that worked on that. That is talent and taste, it's not a sensor. The sensor just gave them the image quality that they needed. There's probably 100 other cameras that probably could have given the same image quality too. The image in that movie looks good because of the people that used it. They just chose a camera that fit that gimbal they were using and the setup that they wanted and the way they were making that movie. That is why that movie looks good. And so that for me, that's my needs. I'm not chasing that thing anymore. I'm like, this camera makes me happy, I'll make good things. That's all I'm kind of thinking about now. If I pick up a camera here and I'm like, I don't like the way the battery door opens on this thing, dead to me. And I kind of move on, right? That's sort of my take on it.
I mean, we're on Andrew's podcast, we're running 2 cameras, that's fine. The new show that we're doing, we're running 5. So, as much as I'd like to own 5 Buranos, it's not worth that. I'm not going to do that, especially for that show, but we can run 5 FX2s, and it's a great price camera. Yes. It's crazy. We live in a great... The 2870 and the 50-150. My old kit before was every prime lens you could get. I was the kind of person that if a new camera came out or a new lens came out, I had to buy it. I had to own it. And I hit this point where I'd be on a shoot or I'd be out shooting and I had too much stuff. I would sit there and go like, oh, like which lens should I use? Like not out of confusion, but more of just like I had way too many options. And it held me back a ton. And switching to just having 3 lenses has kind of freed me from that friction. That was my friction where I was just like, I got way too much going on in this kit. And I have friends that are amazing shooters, and I've just seen they have the 2 lenses in their kit. And I'm like, this is so unfair. Like, you're crushing it. I have all the new stuff, and yours is 10 years old. This doesn't make any sense. And I had too much stuff.
Yeah, it's my fault. I think what you're basically saying is that when you don't have 100 lenses, you start now thinking about the options of the shot in your head and less about the lenses in the bag. I was the same way as Patrick, where I think it was part of my job was to like, what's all the cool new stuff? And then if you like you do a bunch of tests and you're like, this thing is better than that thing, it's like, well, I guess I want the thing that's better. But eventually you kind of do have to distill, because I've rebuilt sets over and over again, and then you try to do it more efficiently or whatever, it does distill down to what things make the job work and what don't. And I've decided, despite it not being what professionals use, is autofocus, has to be good autofocus, period. Reliability is huge. I am fortunate that I can have less reliable cameras work perfectly for me. And then I have sort of like it's less, I guess, of the visceral of like holding it, because I'm not holding the cameras that I use, they're just on a tripod. But it's more of, there's an, I guess, like an intuition that goes into it. I always think that cameras, somebody's making those menus, there's a design language, and it's people that are behind that. And it seems like a lot of the camera brands are very different in that, which means that different people's brains and intentions and how they see waterfalls and cascade menus and stuff, they see it differently. You're going to connect more with somebody else, with one of those type of people's brains than another. So if you are, it's kind of like one of my first tests is like, if I'm just kind of pushing buttons on a camera, is it making sense to me? Like, am I like, I got a feeling this will be down in here. Oh, there it is, doobadoo. But if you use a camera, this has happened, where if I'm emailing the brand and be like, where do you guys keep your insert setting there? If I'm doing that, I'm like, this probably not a camera I'm gonna buy. If I gotta email you to find out, you know, like how to do, I love a fast sensor, everybody loves a fast sensor. But I always wondered, it was like, you know, I'm making these tests, not making the tests, I'm doing the tests that have a result, but the way to feel about the result was always kind of arbitrary. It was like, you know, you can do a thing where you whip the camera back and forth and that shows you the jello, but then people will be like, well, nobody shoots like that. It's like, fair? Okay, so here's a number. This is what the read speed is. And it's like, do you feel good or bad about that? And so it's hard to know until you gotta find your own personal like rolling shutter number. So all this becomes very kind of like abstract. So at the end of the day, it's like, you know what I think the best feel for it is like if you're using your camera well and you're doing your job and something is in the way of that and there is a feature or a product or whatever that can make that thing go away, and that's a buy, right? But if nothing is in the way and you're just like, I heard this one's bigger or whatever, it's like, well, that's not a buy, you know, that just doesn't make any sense. And I think sometimes we're just chasing the fact that like, this thing's bigger, it's faster, it does whatever. But was there a problem all along? Like, was there ever a problem that you're trying to solve? Same boat, but my eyes were kind of open recently. I was somebody who would go and do the IBIS tests and be like, okay, look how good the IBIS is, and that's great for handheld, whatever. But to be perfectly honest, as much as I would showcase that stuff, I've never been super satisfied with what IBIS looks like. But I do like the way a camera looks when flown on a gimbal, if that's what you want. But sometimes a gimbal's a pain in the butt. But what we learned recently was that, because IBIS has been a contentious topic in the last couple of camera launches from other brands, because some cameras have and some don't. And then there's kind of like, well, why would you buy that one? It doesn't have IBIS, this one has IBIS. And we were on, not on set, but we were at a, what do you call it, preview or whatever, of F1, where the most surprising thing I found is that they didn't want IBIS. IBIS was a problem because they're mounting cameras to these race cars, to Formula 1 cars, and they had the choice of like what sensor to use. One was an FX3, the other was an FX6, and the FX6 sensor, which is fundamentally the same but doesn't have IBIS, was the choice. Oddly, it's more expensive, even though it has a missing feature, but it's more expensive because the G-forces of the car aren't going to cause the IBIS module to like move around or lock, and the micro vibrations and the whatever. I don't know anything about race cars, man. But whatever's going on in there, the IBIS shows it, accentuates it, whatever. But when you don't have IBIS, so they're like, no, what do we want IBIS for? We've got $100,000 rigs if we want to fly a camera. It's smooth, right? We need this. And that was where I was. Now I changed my tune. I just say, this is a cinema camera, it doesn't have IBIS. And the headline shouldn't be, oh my God, no IBIS. It should be like, yeah, apparently people don't want it, get it out of there. But they do have cameras that have IBIS if you want it. My question would be, do we just think that we want it? Like, is it actually good, you know? Like, did you see her footage over there? That Christina Manfredi was showing her entire like reel shot on FX6 with long ass focal lengths of like action football players handheld. And I was like, okay, I mean, that's no IBIS, you know? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I guess it mostly comes down to style and what your needs are. I am not a gimbal shooter. I've tried so many times. I have gimbals. We're all collecting dust now with all my drones, too. And for me, it's like, I think as long as I can take the edge off that micro jitter, which to me, like, brings me back to, like, Rebel DSLR days, 2013, 2014 era, which is that DSLR kind of video look, which is micro jitter. that's why I do want a camera with IBIS in it. I do want it to keep getting better and better, and they are. I actually think the IBIS is quite good in the FX2. And for me, I shoot for IBIS, right? So I know its limitations. I know when that thing's going to start jittering on me. I know when it's going to maybe bounce off the wall of the sensor. And you adapt to it with your shooting style. But for me, I don't like using a gimbal. I don't shoot well with it. I feel restricted. It doesn't go where I want it to go. And it's just not my style of shooting. So I do prefer camera.
I'm a big fan of capturing everything like the highest quality possible, just because a lot of those people that I'm shooting, it's pretty iconic stuff that's going down, and I want to have that stuff in like 10, 20 years where I can showcase it again or look back on it and go like, this is a high quality video moment that I captured, and I'm glad I shot it on an expensive camera. But people are usually like, you're crazy, you're filming. Like, I'm on a skateboard rolling with them, with the Burano and like a fisheye lens on, but to me that's what I've always done. So I'm not trying to use like a smaller, lighter camera, but I can. But yeah, Burano is my choice usually. A lot of the other people on skateboarding are using FX6. That's like the skateboarding camera.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you to Sony for having us. Try and get over to the booth and get your hands on FX2. I think you'll really love it. Thank you, guys.
For me, once I had that realization of like, oh, it's not sustainable just to post like trendy content that'll blow up and not do anything, I realized I had to provide some sort of value with my content, and I really boiled down value to these three tenets of education, inspiration, or entertainment. So for me, education is huge. That's probably like most of like my content that performs well is a tutorial or something insightful, like what I pack in my camera bag to shoot this and this, like editing tutorial, my favorite lens filters to use, stuff like that. Anything that's informative, interesting, insightful, like that gives people a reason to save it.